All right, everyone. Right now, the GOP is gunning for Harvard and certain other universities where they feel that anti-Semitism is not being taken seriously enough. And you have had a number of incidents on these campuses where people who are Jewish have been attacked for being Jews, which of course I condemn, because, I don't know. I've gotten to that point where I just refuse to have a problem with anybody, unless they're fucking around with me. So, yeah, it's good to not attack people. It's good to live in peace. I don't want to sound like Yoko Ono, but it would be a better world if people could fucking get along. Maybe minus the socialism aspect that she and Lenin had in mind, then it'd be all good. We be clanking. Forgot to buy energy drinks yesterday. It's a sad time. Love coffee, but, a monster hits harder. Just saying that erythritol really gets me going. But I wanted to make a quaint remark on the GOP's priorities with regards to this. For years, Harvard and other academic institutions have used taxpayer money to indoctrinate people into literal communism, which is the most violent, bloody ideology that the world has ever seen, just to be clear. For years and years, endlessly, they have pushed for limits on free speech, for the denigration of the U.S. Constitution, anti-gunnery, etc., etc., etc. Students go to Harvard and they learn literal lies. Like they, in some cases, they come out of Harvard and they seem to genuinely still believe, after getting supposedly a proper education in civics, still believe that the Second Amendment pertains to the U.S. military and things of that nature. The GOP has complained about it repeatedly. But this is the only time that they choose to actually do something to attempt to defund these universities. Government shouldn't be involved in higher education in general anyway. I support the concept of having like an expanded online learning thing that can be subsidized, because that just sort of makes sense. By the way, Trump has actually suggested that, so when people say, well, the Republicans hate higher education, well, there's one Republican that's actually seeking to expand it, which would really goddamn help the poor, because then they could at least get a basic education and it wouldn't cost an arm and a leg. But the government's involvement in these universities has always been toxic anyway, because it just drives the cost up. When you give more subsidies and say Pell Grants and shit like that, the university doesn't keep its prices the same. It raises them to compensate. They figure that poor student now is getting an extra 10 grand per year, or whatever it would be, depending on their situation. So they can raise their tuition accordingly. And then they can use the extra federal money that they're getting by jacking their prices up to build another sports stadium. Or a diversity HR department, or a safe space, a headspace for autistic people, or something like that. The focus is no longer in general even on the sort of things that are meaningful as far as getting a job or having a functioning society. It's a sign of decadence. The GOP waits and waits, and it isn't until a handful of incidents of anti-Semitic attacks that they actually attempt to go after the federal money. Before, it's just all complaining about it. It's, okay, we have a problem with this, but then they stamp their feet and they pout, and then they do absolutely nothing because they're the GOP and that's sort of their hallmark. I just find the priorities a little bit out of whack. Again, you have a monstrous number of incidents of people being indoctrinated. You've had all sorts of other problems on college campuses for decades now. The U.S. higher educational system is effectively failing at the moment. No reform is really attempted at the end of the day. All of a sudden, this is the bridge too far. This is a handful of attacks. Very small. This is a few dozen people that were attacked over the course of several months. While it's unfortunate, it pales in comparison to the problems that were already there. And yet they never did anything about it now, did they? So, I mean, it's just another symbol of the fact that the GOP has systemic issues as a political movement. They're fickle and they don't know what they're doing. Their strategy sucks ass. They don't, when they should do something, they don't do it, but then all of a sudden they flip their lid. If some identity group that they want to pander to, which is literally what they're doing right now, and I'll get into that in a moment. I know why they're doing this. It's for political reasons. All of a sudden then it's a bridge too far. The reason that they're doing this is because right now the Jewish vote, which is typically very far left, it's like 75% for the Democrats. They're hoping to capitalize upon this in order to pander to that group. How does that make you any different than like a CRT peddler pushing id poll to the BIPOC community or something like that? Don't be hypocrites. I mean, just admit to it. This is a political move. This isn't actually the GOP particularly even caring about these situations. It's them capitalizing upon them. It's the GOP attempting to outmaneuver the Democratic Party with regards to a voting bloc that they feel is particularly of import. And it could pay off. I'm not saying that it potentially won't. For example, the Jewish voting bloc is very powerful in parts of New York. New York is no longer particularly reliably blue. What we're seeing there is the godmother of all goddamn demographic shifts with regards to voting. I don't think the GOP is going to be successful at turning New York into a red state. At least not anytime soon. But they're trying. I mean, yeah, an attempt is being made, but you're kind of using a morbid situation to do it. And again, you never did anything about these federal funds for Harvard, etc., until this one relatively small identity block, which you find important for voting purposes, had experienced a handful of attacks. A small number of them. You've got anti-white bigotry on these campuses and have for years, and the universities have never done anything about it. You've had like false rape claims and stuff like that, like with the Me Too movement and that chick that was carrying her mattress around and destroyed a dude's life on false pretenses, and I don't think ever got in trouble for it. You've got so many problems with the way in which these colleges and universities function, but really this is the only problem that is stated as being cared about. Like, when's the last time that the GOP did anything about critical race theory, for example? Other than the fact that they managed it at the last minute in passing the NDAA and extending FISA spying on U.S. citizens, warrantless wiretaps and blanket warrants and all sorts of other things. The only thing they managed to parse out of that bill was, the Democrats' attempt to defend critical race theory in schools. So they're going to allow the states to defund that at their own option. Not really so much of a victory after all, now is it? And that's basically all the GOP has done. Under its current leadership, think about it, its current leadership is actually more competent than the leadership under McCarthy. This is the GOP slightly improved over what it was before for an extended period of time. You look at the party leadership like McConnell and stuff, it's no surprise why that's happening. That's why the party's trying to backstab Donald Trump. He actually would get something done. Compete with the universities through a subsidized internet-based learning system, which takes almost no effort to maintain, and all of a sudden they're going to have to drop their costs and they're going to hemorrhage tuition enrollment. Why would you spend $50,000 a year on a university for a basic, liberal arts degree when you can spend almost nothing and just learn it online from home? That's what we should be doing. And GOP won't even stand with him on the issue. They'll probably cockblock him if he tries to fund it if he's reelected, by the way. You wait and see if he actually attempts to implement that. Meaningful educational reform that would actually be positive for the country, the GOP will probably balk and refuse to fund it. That's about all. Peace out.